Meesho's voice bots are serving more than 60,000 calls per day. I get queries on Meesho like, hawa dene wala pankha. How did you build it so quickly?
When you're building out ML products, it's an iterative process.
How do you understand that with traditional methods, right? Now, here LLMs come in.
Building a conviction on whether this particular problem statement can be well served with the technology. Yeah.
Do you see that coming to e-commerce anytime soon?
I think we are still in the early parts of the journey in terms of understanding how Gen AI can play a very big role in recommendation systems.
Welcome back to Decoding AI. Today we are going to discuss Gen AI for consumer use cases. And we could not have had a better guest than Debdoot for this. So Debdoot is the Chief Data Scientist, Head of AI and Demand Engineering at Meesho. But this is not the first time he is building consumer AI use cases at scale for India. He started off as a lead data scientist at Myntra. He was the head of AI at Hike, then the VP of AI at ShareChat more recently. So let's unpack his illustrious profile and understand what his daily life is like. And let's see if we can get some tidbits for building AI for consumer. So Debdoot, let's start with actually our common alma mater. We both are from IT Delhi. So this was 2008, I think, when you graduated.
Yes.
So what was ML like back then? Was there any ML? How did you get into it? How did you end up starting?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting story. I think at IT Delhi, when I graduated, I did a few courses, but like nothing too serious. My thesis was in software engineering, and I was co-advised by someone at IBM Research, and that's where I landed my first job. And most of my machine learning training happened during my tenure at IBM Research. And
this was in Bangalore?
It was in Delhi.
Okay, nice.
This lab, it used to be within IIT Delhi, interestingly, and then it moved out to a center at Vasant Kunj in Delhi. And very interestingly, I joined their programming languages and software engineering department. As the months and years passed, it was getting increasingly sort of difficult to have research funded in programming languages, and all the funding was coming in machine learning.
Mm-hmm. This was the Watson days, I guess. IBM
This
Watson.
was pre-Watson, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like machine learning itself was very early,
Sure.
right? But it was picking up as a toolkit, and people were finding very, very interesting results and applying it to a variety of problems. Very ironically, like we started on this problem of making knowledge workers in different IBM units more productive. I mean, this was like after 15 years now, there's so much of hype and craze about enterprise search, and it's coming back in a big way. And these were very early days, of course, but even back in those days, people were thinking that, hey, Google has come up and has made search so very effective on the website, right?
Yeah.
But enterprise search is a very different beast, right? And how do you get the same amount of productivity in the enterprise? And like majority of my research centered around that problem. Did a lot of work around how do you extract information from documents, like documents that you have in the enterprise setting, right? Spreadsheets and Word documents and flowcharts and PowerPoints and so on.
Coincidentally, that's still a very hot area.
It is still, and like as I think of it, it has come up and made a comeback after all these years. Some of my early work was in that area, and as we were trying to solve that problem of information extraction, it turned out that there's no better toolkit than going to machine learning, right? So that's when I started picking up on machine learning during my tenure at IBM Research, and increasingly went deeper into the subject.
Great. And you decided to stay back in India after all this good work. So that was an interesting choice. Would love to know how you made that choice. And what was then when you're looking out of maybe IBM research, what was the ML landscape like in India, and how did you zero in on Myntra back then?
Yeah, very interesting. So like I spent around 6 to 7 years at IBM Research. Towards the latter part of my tenure, I had a brief stint at Almaden as well in the US. But then I decided to move back. And at that point, one of the things I was trying to increasingly see how this technology can be applied in a real world setting. And when you're at a research lab, you can sort of like it was a great place in terms of learning about new things, experimenting with new techniques, and I actually am sort of indebted to the IBM Research for shaping a big way who I am today, and a lot of the values were sort of really seeded in those formative years. But during the latter part, I also started thinking that, hey, now a lot of these toolkits have matured to an extent that it can leave a very large impact on the real world, right? And that's when I started wondering, what is it that I would need to really have to make it happen? And one of the things was that, hey, you need first-hand access to data.
Yeah.
And you need to deploy things and try them out, right? Quickly learn from the feedback from those deployments. And what could be an environment which could really enable and facilitate a lot of these things. And I started chatting with some folks at Myntra. These were very early days. Even in if you look at Myntra, the company, right after I joined, I think it got acquired by Flipkart. But even we used to have a good knowledge sharing across the two companies, and there was a group at Flipkart also trying to make sense of, hey, how do you apply data science in a real world setting and create impact on business.
This would have been
statements.
an interesting time, right? 2015,
Yes.
16. India and B2C apps were taking off. You needed recommendation systems.
Correct.
There's no precursor. So building
Absolutely.
everything from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. And incidentally, you mentioned recommendation systems. It was definitely one of the areas where AI started getting applied, and people started witnessing a lot of impact in those areas. And we were, I think, one of the early e-commerce platforms at Myntra to launch hyper-personalized product listings, right, at a unit of one. And I recall these techniques were very, very early, right? I mean, I remember when we were doing personalization at Myntra, one of the core problems, which still is, right? I mean, in any recommendation systems, how do you make sense of two products and understand that, hey, this product is similar to this other product, right? The key thing, if I sort of recall back in those days creating ML systems, is there was a lack of frameworks, right? So today, a lot of the heavy lifting is powered by the incredible frameworks that we have, both on developing models, deploying them, and so on. And none of that used to exist back in those days. And even if you think in terms of the algorithms, right? This was pre-deep learning, or deep learning was just about starting to make its presence felt. Incidentally, we remember we were, in fact, one of the first ones to launch hyper-personalized product listings at scale at Myntra. And as we were doing that, the problem that is the holy grail of recommendation systems, that how do you figure out two items are similar, right? And as we were trying to find out good solutions to that problem, back in those days, most of the approaches were statistical in nature. And I remember the Word2Vec paper had just come out.
Yes.
And we were marveled by the kind of possibilities that paper demonstrated. This was, I think, late 2013. And in 2014, when we were trying to build this system, we thought that, hey, like the same idea of understanding more about words from sentences, there's an analogy in our world where there are user interactions and the actions are happening on these products, right? So can we build very nice representations of products with which we can solve that problem of which two products are similar or substitutable? And then we got some very great results and we launched that and that led to a lot of impact.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, you're correct. I mean, the lack of frameworks, and for every part of the problem, you need to build from ground up. But it was also a fulfilling experience as you do that, because you get to understand the challenges and like where do you sort of stumble, what really sort of makes it work.
Fantastic. So fast forwarding your role to now, why is AI super important to a business like Meesho?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a business like Meesho, today we are at a stage where pretty much every function or every pillar of the overall company or the marketplace that we run is powered by AI in a very, very significant way, right? Of course, like on the shopping experience side or in the consumer experience side, recommendation systems and ranking plays a very important role. We are fundamentally a matchmaking problem, a matchmaking platform. So that problem is important to us. But if you look at each part of the platform, so like as we work with our sellers, in making our sellers successful, there's such a lot of AI which is going in, like right from providing a very simplified procedure to list products on the platform, right? To enabling sellers on thinking about how do you price products in the right way for the sales to grow? How do you run ads on the platform efficiently? Right, so all of these problems being powered by some AI model at the end of the day. If you look at the logistics side or the fulfillment side of things, there are many sort of applications of AI. So for instance, fraud detection and mitigation is an important problem, which is being powered by large-scale machine learning models. The entire logistics, and now Meesho, if you've heard, we have a logistics platform called Valmo that is being like built out from ground up using AI at every particular component of that particular platform, right from how do you reason about Indian addresses, how do you sort of geocode them to a location, to figuring out how do you efficiently do order allocation, do speedy deliveries, and so on, to customer support. We are applying Gen AI in particular in a very big way. So every part of the user journey or the seller's journey on the platform is sort of guided and enabled through AI and machine learning.
If you could share an anecdote of maybe one of the most satisfying problems or hardest problems that your team has solved in the last 2 years.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, like solving the matchmaking on the platform, right? I mean, at the end of the day, people come to Meesho with some shopping intent, and it's our job to understand what that intent is, right, as quickly as possible. Also understand who's that user, what are the tastes, and what are the long-term preferences for some of the loyal users very, very effectively. And then find the right products from like hundreds of millions of products which are listed on Meesho, right? And that ranking problem is powered end-to-end with AI and machine learning models. And over the years, of course, we've evolved it from fairly simple models to much more sophisticated models. Today, I think if you look at the entire process of figuring out which are the 20 products to surface in every surface of the Meesho platform, there are multiple large models which are in action, right? From the retrieval side to the ranking side. These are all fairly large transformer models which are in action in a cascade trying to solve that problem. And like one is the innovation on the architectural side, but the other is how do you really understand this problem from first principles and then balance out multiple objectives, right? So we talked about the relevance problem to surface a product according to the user's intent. That, of course, is at the heart of the problem statement, and that drives the conversion on the platform in a big way. But equally important are other goals, right? So for instance, Meesho's value proposition is centered around the lowest cost,
Sure.
right? How do you live up to that value proposition, right? How do you optimize that, hey, the best priced products are being surfaced at for any given context? How do you optimize for quality, right? Because retention on the platform is in a big way a function of the quality of the goods or the products that we deliver. When they are happy, they'll come back. And how do you sort of optimize for quality as well? And then if you look at it, ultimately it's a marketplace, right? So, and for efficiently running a marketplace, you need to do a good job at servicing the user's interests, but also the seller side interests, right? And how do you enable new sellers to come up on the platform, right? And sort of become successful, new products as well as new sellers to become successful within a short timeline. That requires us to really go deep and ensure that the matchmaking is as fair as possible, right? There is no rich gets richer effect and biases which are very easy to creep into such a system if you don't pay adequate attention to it. So how do you solve some of those problems, which ensures that, hey, like you also have a very strong focus on flywheel,
Sure.
right? Ultimately, a lot of the goodness in terms of growth of the platform is determined by how core is your technology to the flywheel and how effectively it is powering that. So I think optimizing for like understanding about what are the drivers to long-term retention and finding proxies of that you can control while you're solving this matchmaking ranking
to me,
problem.
it seems like there are a lot of levers, right, that you mentioned. There's intent, understanding, there is ranking, there is retrieval, and so on. Do you see any of these levers getting disrupted because of Gen AI? And does it like have a major business impact?
Yeah, I think a lot of them, right, ultimately. And I think we are still in the early parts of the journey in terms of understanding how Gen AI can play a very big role in recommendation systems. For starters, a lot of the applications of Gen AI is happening in understanding this intent. So for instance, if you take the example of search queries, right, which are long tail in nature and inherently ambiguous, LLMs, because of their they excel in understanding natural language across a multitude of languages, can process and understand that text very, very effectively, right? So how do we have LLMs understand the query and decode it so that the retrieval
if you allow me, I would like to interject an example. We caught up 2 years back, if you remember. We got coffee near your home, and you mentioned that I get queries on Meesho like hawa dene wala pankha.
Absolutely, right? Remember that example.
Exactly. How does hawa dene wala machine?
Exactly.
Yes. How do you understand that with traditional methods? Right now, here LLMs come in.
Yeah, and like a very large fraction of the queries on the platform are like that, right? They are ill-specified. They are in like a vernacular language, which has very, very low data. And like if you move away from Hindi to the other languages, the data gets very, very less dense, right? So how do you build models for being effective in such a setting. And there, the world knowledge of LLMs can help in a very big way, right? There are other things, right? So, for instance, we are getting into problem statements of understanding, hey, is this product purely from the image and other information that we have about it, is it relevant to this query, right? So think of it as like a relevance judge, right, for search. And GenAI is again helping out in a big way. And there are very interesting results that are coming in solving the core of the problem as well, right? So representation learning of items from large user interaction sequences. Increasingly, we are seeing that the scaling laws that have played out so beautifully in the natural language world is also playing out in some of these data sets. And that will make retrieval and ranking also being powered by some of these LLM style architectures very, very soon.
Very nice. And one of the very often talked about topics now, and it's gaining more steam as we progress through the AI cycle, is voice input and the modality of voice disrupting interfaces.
Yeah.
Do you see that coming to e-commerce anytime soon, or has it already come and we are living in that era?
Yeah, I think it is already arriving,
Okay.
is what I would say. I mean, you mentioned like the voice bot example that we worked upon, but even in the shopping experience side, I think there is tremendous application of voice-led interfaces, particularly powerful for the audience that we at Meesho serve, right?
Yeah.
Because like this user, we call them the Bharat user,
Yes.
right? This user persona has a fundamental problem in typing, right? Typing using an Latin keyboard where you're typing out a vernacular text, where you don't know the spelling, and because of the limitations of the mobile interface, all of this makes text input very, very difficult and inefficient, right? And that limits the fundamental expressions that users have, right? Imagine typing out a long sentence, right? And like the other thing about our user persona is they are not very good at keyword search, right? They are not born in the Google era. In finding keywords to search with and effectively get results does not come naturally to them, right? But they can express themselves and their needs in a particular, maybe in a longer sentence, right? And our search systems are not designed to deliver on those queries. And that's where I think the voice can help them express in a much more uninhibited way. And that opens up a lot of opportunities. So you're correct. I mean, like each part of the shopping experience, I think we will see increasingly a role of a voice input in a big way.
Yeah. In an adjacent use case of voice, it was recently in the news that Meesho's voice bots are serving more than 60,000 calls per day.
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks back, so I'm assuming it has gone up now, the numbers. How did you build it so quickly? Because a lot of platforms are trying it, but do you have any tips for other people trying to build voice bots? That should they start, and like what should be some pitfalls to watch out for?
Yeah, I think the tips won't be very different from the tips of building any other product. Be extremely problem first. Try to get to an MVP very, very soon, right? And today you have excellent framework support available. You don't need to build out a lot of the components from scratch anymore, right? And if you stitch together an experience and create an MVP, and from there on, you start looking at which parts of the pipeline need to be focused on to get to a better level in order for being ready for production usage. I think evaluation, thinking about evaluation very deeply, about metrics which make sense for your use case, right? And get like a focus on those metrics, both measuring
and
those metrics.
And you have a separate evals team also, I believe.
Absolutely,
yeah. Makes sense.
So thinking about evaluation very, very early in the game right? Helps do those quick iterations even offline, and before you can.
And is all this tooling needed to build voice bots or voice interfaces? Are they available in the open source ecosystem now, or you still have to rely for some commercial providers?
I think a lot of them are available in open source, so
Okay.
you can build on top of open source. You can, like certain parts, you can sort of fall back to commercial providers as well.
I see. Do you have a preference at Meesho? Like whenever you're looking out for any tooling or infrastructure, do you want to go open source? And
Yeah.
if only if you find nothing, then you go for that, or it doesn't really matter that much?
I think what matters is building a conviction on whether this particular problem statement can be well served with
Fair.
the technology. And in order to get that conviction fast, maybe like going to the latest and greatest of proprietary models help, right? To just develop conviction
Sure.
that, hey, this problem can be solved. Having said that, where you think that there is a strategic focus and you need to build and create an asset, and you definitely it's a no-brainer that this use case will work, and we would want to apply LLMs or for that matter any AI model, you would definitely go in and build on top of open source for the flexibility that it provides, the ease of customization, and also like some of the like the data does not lead your
Fair.
premises and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all of those concerns.
So talking of open source, actually, Debdoot, at the NVIDIA summit in Mumbai, even I was there when you made the announcement that you'll be open sourcing certain parts of Meesho's ML framework. So for our audience, if you can talk about what will it contain and who can it benefit, and also what's your motivation behind open sourcing?
Yeah, I think we decided to open source the ML platform. I think we'll do that bit by bit in a phased manner. I think the motivation, one, of course, was to give back to open source a little bit, because we benefit as a company so
Yeah.
much from building on top of open source. So it's that factor was playing out. But I think more importantly, what we realized is there is a strong need for scalable machine learning platforms, right? And different components for that kind of a platform, right? So for instance, feature store, right? We do not have very many credible feature store alternatives in open source, which can run at massive scale. As your platform starts scaling, especially for some of the early to mid to scale stage startups, when you're deploying machine learning, a component like feature store is sort of a mandatory component, right? And
Okay.
like there are a lot of things, like if you look at the scale at which we operate at Meesho, we are serving over 2 trillion features per day.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. This is
And
true Bharat scale, India scale.
yes, and if you were to find a system, there is no,
Yeah.
I mean, forget open source.
Sure.
I mean, I'm pretty sure even proprietary
Exactly,
alternatives
yeah.
cannot work out of the
Yeah,
box and
yeah.
deliver that scale, right? So there is a lot of innovation which has gone in when it comes to caching, when it comes to like to enable us to deliver that high throughput at low latency. And we thought that it's like, why should we sort of sit on top of it? Let the entire community benefit.
That's very nice of you, like, and the entire team at Meesho. And I hope more Indian startups, once they start hitting scale, there are some successes they see on the tech, they start open sourcing things that will lead to our own ecosystem growing.
I hope that too.
Yeah. Thanks. So thanks for leading the way there. Talking about the talent in India for building AI, do you see there's a talent gap right now?
Like when it comes to the talent gap question, right? I mean, like other things, there is a demand supply equation here, right? As and when demand sort of starts building in, we have a lot of supply of engineers, young engineers coming out every year. Those engineers would be motivated to pick up whatever skill sets are needed to deliver on these problem statements. And I believe it will take time, but we are on a virtuous cycle here, right? I mean, if you get, and it's not that when you're building out ML products, it's an iterative process. You will not like become and deliver the best in class best in class model at day zero, and it's not also required that is needed to arrive at business benefit, right? It's not really a 1 or 0 game. You start off with some product, you get some business benefits, you build more conviction in the technology, you start investing, and through the iteration, you start building in more and more sophistication.
So even when it comes to like business implementation, it's still very researchy, right? Correct. The way it seems like from what you're describing.
It is.
It's a mix of...
That's historically, it has been researchy, but that is also changing, right? So if you look at the kind of skill sets that are required to do machine learning at scale, if you rewind back like 10 years from where we started, it used to be a lot more researchy, and you need to build out a lot of frameworks from scratch. You need a very strong understanding of the math and the probabilities and statistics and like that part of the competency. But it is being eased like every year, right? So more and more there are excellent frameworks that are emerging which provide you higher order abstractions with which you can build solutions, right? And that is making the field of machine learning more and more accessible to a much broader pool of engineers. And that is, I think, the case with any engineering discipline, right? When it starts off, it is much more theoretical in nature. You need more research and more rigor of understanding. But then as impact gets created, that field, there's a democratization of the skill sets which happen because people start building out good frameworks which make your job easier. And that also makes other people to enter into this particular discipline.
So as of now, where we stand today, like what is the hardest skill you find to hire?
Yeah, so let me sort of take a step back and like talk about like 3 skill sets which define an machine learning engineer, right? The first one, of course, as we were discussing, is a very strong understanding of the mathematical foundations in machine learning theory and how do you pick the right toolkit for a given problem, right? And not just that, how do you understand the why of why is this particular technique the best suited? A little bit of lineage also helps there, right? Like what are the other techniques which have led to this technique, right? So a very, very deep understanding of the theoretical foundations, right? So that's one skill set. The second skill set is more coming from the computer science skills, I would say systems knowledge, right? So the first is more around the algorithmic part of solving a problem. The second is about, hey, once you have an algorithm, how do you deploy it more efficiently, right? And in order to deliver products at scale, the systems expertise is incredibly important, right? And that again comes in different flavors. Like there's a data engineering flavor, and now increasingly we're seeing that how do you train these large models in a distributed manner that requires you to really understand the internals of how, let's say, GPUs work, how do you scale out training workloads and so on.
Suddenly CUDA is back in vogue. So
CUDA
many people
is back, So all of that, right? Like which is the system side of expertise. And the third, I mean, in order to apply ML and build great products is fundamentally your first principle thinking, right? how do you design metrics, the right metrics for this problem, right? How do you have that user first and problem first mindset to be able to formulate a problem statement? How do you break down tasks, right? And like this is not just in an applied setup. I would say even when you if you think about how LLMs have come into the being, a lot of it is if you think of things like chain of thought and so on, these are smart breakdowns of, hey, this is how human mind solves this problem. And can we apply some of the parallels to break down tasks and to create examples in a way that the model generalizes much better?
Sure.
Right? So like this, I would say, is more about first principle thinking, and through that sort of creating the right metrics, breaking down tasks.
Almost sounds
in the right
like
way.
a superhuman to be good at all three. No wonder ML engineers are paid so well today.
Yeah, and that's where, to your question, I think there is this like ML engineer persona who is like the ideal ML engineer will tick off all the three boxes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it's very rare to find such individuals. So in practice, what you would see is there are individuals which will probably tick off two of those three competencies, and that's fine too, right? And that's where the role of generalists versus specialists come up.
Sure.
Right? And there's a space for both kinds of personas, right? We need people to go deep into each of these competencies, as well as we need people who are a little bit more generalists, right? Who can sort of do all three to some extent.
Great. Yeah. So as we start 2025, what's your wish list for the underlying AI technology? Maybe one or two things that you're most looking forward to.
There will be many, but in particular, of course, I think as we were discussing, right? I mean, like the key bottlenecks in deploying, let's say, Gen AI or LLMs in large-scale workloads is still about cost and latency.
Sure.
Right? And I think if you look at the last quarter, at least, there is a tremendous focus in open source community and elsewhere as well on small models, right, and more efficient models, which are increasingly becoming very, very powerful and effective. And I would believe this trend continues. So that's one that will sort of ease deployment in large-scale settings. Second, I think LLMs have excelled with their knowledge of the world when it comes to language understanding and vision understanding tasks, right? To make them much more mainstream in, let's say, B2C or even other enterprise use cases, I would sort of like want to have a deeper focus on techniques which will bring in the knowledge of the enterprise or knowledge of the customer, right? And make that more seamlessly to the model, right? To make it much better in personalizing experiences.
Personalization, fair,
right?
fair, yeah.
So that's another one.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think these would be the top two.
You didn't mention video. Is it
Yes.
because you think video, like at scale video gen is not possible in the next 2 years, or?
No, absolutely it's not. I think Sora just launched. I think it's opening up access, and you see the possibilities there. I think in a very big way, a lot of the B2C use cases will be powered by video generation, right? I think if I were to pick one big unlock which will make this technology adoption much more mainstream and open up a wide range of use cases, it is video.
Yeah.
Right. Interestingly, I was at a panel or a chat like this 4 or 5 years back, and they asked me the same question of what's your predictions, right? And one of the things that I said at that point was, hey, I would expect videos to be generated, like in social media, and a significant part of social media consumption to be on these generated videos. And by 2025, they asked me for a date. And so I'm not
Let's
too
see, we
far
still
off.
have 12 months. Yes,
Yes.
yes. And it's
So
already happening in some forms, right?
it is
Like,
happening definitely in pockets. So I think
yeah.
that prediction
Yes.
has
Yes,
come
for
true
sure. Yeah.
before time.
Yeah.
And the other one would be that, hey, can you generate content for this particular individual
Yes,
on the
correct.
fly?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
It's not that you pre-generate content, but on the fly,
Yeah.
as we are having this discussion, I would have content which is
Yeah.
tailor-made for this particular context.
And it can lead to, like, there's so many Reddit threads, for example, on fan stories. Like, if I'm a Game of Thrones fan, I could have a different ending, and I can create that ending
Absolutely.
with AI and then publish that on a platform, and therefore everyone becomes a creator.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the next frontier, and a lot of B2C use case, be it social media, be it education, can be powered in a very, very significant way
Yeah.
if that technology starts becoming more
Great.
mainstream.
So, on that optimistic note, thanks again for your time, Debdoot.
Thanks, Anagh, for having me.
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed knowing what all you do on a daily basis. But I'm sure all that is very important. You're running one of India's fastest growing and at scale businesses, which is direct to consumer. And AI, as you said, covers every bit of what you do, every touch point that you have. And thanks again for open sourcing a lot of the work that you're doing. And hope to have you back here soon.
Absolutely, we'll be most glad. Thank you, Anagh.